Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. Over the last 6 months, I've lost count of the amount of times that I've been asked to do a review of Manjaro Linux. So it's high time we looked at the distribution. So let's go to the intro and then we'll spin it up and see what we think. Okay, welcome back. So as you all know, my preference for distros are Debian, Debian Stable, and Arch. And I swap and change between them constantly. They've both got strengths and weaknesses. Debian is incredibly stable and I appreciate it as a workhorse. The downside, of course, is that many of the packages are quite old. But I sort of get over that by installing flat packs of the likes of OBS Studio and Kdenlive. And it seems to be a decent compromise. Arch, on the other hand, is bleeding edge. And it has some real strengths. I like the Pacman package manager. I think it's very fast and it's effective. And I like the AUR. But because it's bleeding edge, sometimes the packages can break, although they tend to be fixed quite quickly. And I swap and change between the two. For the last couple of months, I've probably been 80% Debian, but I was 80% Arch before that, so I like both. And the reason I tend to stick with Debian and Arch is because I like to stay quite close to the source. It's not that I've got anything against variants of Debian or Arch-based systems, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that I like to customize a system to suit myself. That said, there are some excellent variations on a theme out there. As many of you know, I'm dual booting Peppermint Linux and Mint Linux on my little ThinkPad at the moment. And I've been spending a lot of time away from home staying in hotels, and I've got to say that I'm pretty impressed with both. So, talking about variations on a theme, we come to Manjaro. It's an incredibly popular distribution, claims to be very, very user-friendly. So it's appropriate for perhaps new users to Linux, but also experienced users. And it's been riding high in the distro watch charts for a number of years now. I've never really used it. The only one time that I downloaded it and installed it was when I was testing out i3. And I knew that Manjaro did a particularly well-developed version of i3, and I was impressed with it, but I never really looked at Manjaro, the distro itself. It was more about i3, the window manager, that I was investigating, and what I found out about that, although I think it's a great tiling window manager, tiling window managers aren't really the thing for me. But that still leaves Manjaro. What do we think about it? Well, let's go to the split screen. So let's start by just having a quick look at Distro Watch. And you can see at the moment Manjaro is riding high at number 2. These are page hits on the Distro Watch page, so they're not really, well, not at all an indication of popularity as such, but just what people have been clicking on DistroWatch. But it's been pretty high up for a while. So why is it? Well, let's have a look at Manjaro's own wiki. And the statement that has kind of inspired the title of this video, it's Arch Jim, but not as we know it, is Manjaro's own statement that it's a different kind of beast. So what makes it different? Well, it's Arch-based and Arch-compatible, but it's not Arch. As such, far from being just an easy-to-install or pre-configured version of Arch, Manjaro is actually a very different kind of beast, apparently. In fact, the differences between Manjaro and Arch are far greater than the differences between popular Ubuntu distributions and its many derivatives, apparently. It's developed independently from Arch and by a completely different team. It's designed to be accessible to newcomers, while Arch is aimed at experienced users. Okay. It draws software from its own independent repositories, and that's important. And it contains software packages that are not provided by Arch. And it provides its own distribution-specific tools, such as its hardware detection utility and a settings manager. Okay, so it's not just about theming, that's the important thing. It's made significant changes and moved away from a standard Arch distribution. And it uses 3 different types of repositories. There's Unstable, which is just a day or 2 behind Arch. There's Testing, a week or so behind Arch. And then there's Stable, usually about 2 weeks behind Arch, apparently. That's the default, Stable. And Manjaro aims to provide updates and downloads to that repository, and if the developers feel that a particular package within Arch Stable needs to be patched, well, they'll do it. So, user-friendly tools, fast, powerful, always up to date, still cutting edge, but holding back Arch's bleeding edge nature for a week or 2, just to make sure things work as they should. Okay, so that makes sense to me. It's different enough to give it a spin. It's not just about theming. So what about the distro itself? Well, recently Manjaro took the step of becoming a corporate entity. Is that the right word? Setting up as a business. One of the reasons that they did this was to make sure that they could take on full-time employees and maintainers, which I think is a great idea. I love the idea of people sitting in a bedroom and contributing to a particular distribution, you know, and doing it all for free. But if you really want to push a distro forward, it does help if you can have people working for you full time. They also transferred donation funds to a non-profit organisation, and they're looking, obviously, for commercial support as well. I don't have a problem with developers getting paid, and I can understand why Manjaro's taken this step. Let's face it, Ubuntu has Canonical behind it, so it's really not much different to that, in my view. That said, they have done a few things which were, shall we say, not taken that well by the general Linux community. One of those was incorporating a commercial program into the installer, FreeOffice, as opposed to LibreOffice. And there was something of an uproar, which I watched with interest. Manjaro responded, though, pretty quickly to the community uproar, and they've made changes now that I believe allows you to install FreeOffice or LibreOffice, so the choice is still yours. Fair enough. You know, they responded quickly to what the community saw was a bad thing, and they've given people a choice. So, let's switch back to the main cam. They're obviously very serious in pushing Manjaro and developing it, and I like the fact that they've got full-time developers on their team. I think that certainly helps. Although I think Debian still works on the basis of 100% volunteers, and that's been around for so long that works as well. So whichever way you choose, it's all good as far as I'm concerned. But there's enough that seems to set Manjaro apart from standard Arch that it's certainly worth a look. So let's go and have a look in VirtualBox. I've downloaded the XFCE edition, which is the edition that the Manjaro website offers as the first option, and we'll see what it has to offer. I should say, before going any further, that you can download Manjaro in a whole variety of formats with different desktop environments and window managers. Some of them are the official variants, some of them are the community variants. So whatever your personal preference is, you will probably find the one that fits you. Just very quickly looking at Manjaro's downloads page, XFCE is there as the first choice, but you can also download Plasma, or you can download GNOME, or Architect, which is an interesting idea. It's a text installer, I believe, but you can build Manjaro however you want. You also have the option here to use some of their community editions, and here we have Budgie, Cinnamon, i3, Mate, OpenBox. Okay, so there's plenty of choice. But enough with that, let's get on and let's look at the distro. So you should see in front of you now my copy of VirtualBox. I've got Manjaro set up there with a 32 gig virtual hard drive, video memory. Okay, it's only 16 meg of RAM. I've got 8 gig of RAM set up and 2 cores of my i5 CPU. I've also set it up in EFI mode, so let's see how well it copes, especially with VirtualBox's less than perfect EFI compatibility. And we'll hit start and see what happens. And as normal, VirtualBox starts up on the wrong page. Now, looking at the boot screen, I really quite like this. You've got options you can set before you even boot. So I would like to set up Europe. And let's look for London. There we go. So that's my time zone. What do I want to set up for my keyboard? Well, I want to set up GB or UK key table, GB. Okay. Language, English, and GB. Great. And let's boot it. Oh, hold on, I've missed an option there. Drivers, do we just want free drivers or do we want non-free as well? Let's set up non-free to give it every opportunity to boot. And here we go. The normal time lag that you get with VirtualBox, and we may well come back in a second. Although, having said that, it's booted up pretty quickly. So, all good. It seems to be going through the stages. Well, we finally got there. It seemed to hang on a black screen for an awful long time, to the extent that I thought maybe this won't boot in EFI mode. And I started to think that maybe the ISO was perhaps corrupted. So I re-downloaded the ISO, booted again, still black screen for 5 minutes plus. I tried booting in BIOS mode, again, black screen for 5 minutes plus. So I changed back to EFI and I thought, just be patient, Steve. And sure enough, eventually it did boot. So I don't know whether this is something to do with Manjaro's hardware detection, scripts running that kind of slow the process down a little bit in VirtualBox. But anyway, If you try it in VirtualBox and it seems to hang, the answer seems to just be patient. So you can see the live DVD is now booted. It's not in full screen mode. Well, it is in full screen mode, but it's not maximum resolution. But that doesn't really matter for the installation. So we've booted in, and we're immediately greeted by a welcome screen, which is quite nice. And that can go full screen as well if we just drag it to the left. I'm not so sure that the wallpaper is to my tastes, but it's quite a clean layout. And I'm a big fan of these welcome screens, which we'll look at later. But let's just get it installed for now. So let's launch the installer and see what happens. Welcome to Manjaro Linux 18.1.5 Jurea installer. Okay, I presume this is Calamaris. And Jurea is what they're actually calling the latest version of Manjaro. I see it's already selected British English and assume that's because I was allowed to set the options at the beginning. So let's click next and see what happens. It's selected the correct time zone, which is brilliant. It's selected the correct keyboard, which is brilliant. It's spotted that it's in EFI mode. So let's just do an erase disk. Let it partition the whole disk for EFI. And I see it's creating a 300 meg FAT32 partition. No swap again, but it's we keep seeing that on the latest installers. Not that you need a swap for VirtualBox. And 31.7 gig ext4 root partition. Okay, let's hit next and let's enter our login name. So OTB as normal. And I'm just entering the password now. Use the same password for the admin account? I think so. Let's click next. Right, so now we get the option. Do we want Manjaro with no Office suite? Or do we want LibreOffice? Or do we want FreeOffice? Do you know, I'm just going to stick with LibreOffice for now, and we'll click next. It's giving me a summary of what it's done, which all looks good. So let me hit install. Do you really want to do this? Yes, I do, please. Install now. Oh, the installer failed to create a partition on the disk ATA VBox hard disk. That's interesting. Let's try this again. Launch installer. Let's go to next, next, next. Let's do manual partitioning and see if we have better luck with that. And let's create a new partition with the mount point root. Okay. And let's see if we need to create a mount point for our ESP. Let's go to boot EFI. And let's see if we can do it this time. Okay, fingers crossed, everyone. LibreOffice, next. Install. Install now, please. Okay, that seems to have done it. Okay, we'll come back when it's finished doing what it needs to do. So here we are. I shut down the live image of Manjaro. I removed the ISO, which hadn't automatically been removed. I rebooted. I got for a brief second an error message that said that could not boot from CD/DVD. okay. But it immediately kind of rebooted VirtualBox, and the next time it booted up fine. I did a full system update because it wouldn't go to full screen initially. And after the full system update, well, not a problem. I can go to full screen here if I just click on this. And we have 1920 by 1080. So all good. In fact, let's just check that in the settings. So display 1920 by 1080. So I didn't have to mess about with the VirtualBox Guest Editions ISO at all. So here we are. A nice looking, very clean layout. And I do like these welcome screens that come up. I didn't to start off with, but I think they're quite useful. Let's just run through this. So there's a README that talks about just general things, getting help, looking in the forums, the IRC, etc., etc. What else? A direct link to the forums and to get involved. Release info. Manjaro 19, apparently, now that I've fully upgraded it. To a chat room. What happens if I go there? Ah, interesting. Okay, so it takes us straight to the Manjaro's chat room. Let's close that. Development. Okay, straight to a GitLab page. The wiki, which I think is probably going to be the most useful for new users, which talks about, well, it looks to be a fairly well-maintained wiki with an overview, how to use, how to download, how to set it up in BIOS or UEFI, Conky, repositories, Pacman, etc., etc. Okay, so a good starting point. And then we have mailing lists and an option to donate. What about applications? What's that all about? So, Manjaro Hello, web browsers. So at the moment, we have Firefox installed. Let's try to install something else. Let's try to go for Chromium, update the system. Optional dependencies for Chromium? I don't think so. Let me put in my password. And I'm assuming it's now going to install. Let me hit apply. Download of Snappy. Does that mean it's using snaps? I don't know. We'll have a look after to see if Snapd is installed. So, I actually quite like the fact that it gives you the option to just have a look at what applications you've got installed right from the get-go. And I'm assuming Chromium is now installed. Yes, it is. This is quite nice. Email, Office suites. You've got the full option there. MS Office Online. Okay, so that gives you a set of links, I assume, to online Microsoft Office. Office apps, Abbey Word and GNU Merrick. No, I can't think how to say that, but you know what I mean. Ebooks, text editors, printing, Manjaro printing. Right, okay. I'm going to click yes on that and we'll see if I can actually print. So, what do we want there? I don't want any scanning application at the moment. Let's just install it and see what happens. So it's going to basically install a whole range of different things to reinstall Chromium. Strange. Okay. Checking into conflicts and downloading. Right, while it's doing that, let's just have a quick look around the system. So from what I can see, it's a straightforward XFCE desktop, some quite nice wallpaper, and it's got the whisker menu pre-installed and set up ready to go. I can't say I'm a huge fan of the wallpaper, but that's just a personal preference. Okay, transaction successfully installed. Great. But I do quite like the feel of it. It just feels very clean. Home folder. Yeah, I'm a bit of a fan of the icon set, and it's almost a dark theme, which is quite nice. So let's have a look through here. So accessories. So what have we got? Catfish file search, Engramper archive manager, calculator, Hewlett-Packard device manager, Light DM GTK plus greeter settings. Okay, installed from the Wago. Manjaro application utility. What's that? Oh, it's what we've just been looking at from the welcome screen. So we can access it separately as well. Manjaro user guide, documentation for beginners. 138 pages apparently. Oh, I see. And right, well, I've got to say, let's just full screen this. I am always a fan of any sort of written documentation that comes with a distro. Yeah, that's great. It's like a manual for use. So quite impressed at that. So great marks for Manjaro there. You've got mousepad installed, a menu editor, a Raj, which I think is the calendar application, a screenshot application, software tokens. I assume there's something to do with a VPN, but I'm not sure to be honest. A sensor viewer. Okay, I'm on VirtualBox here, so I wouldn't necessarily expect to see anything, so that's fine. Where was I? Accessories. Thunar file manager, a task manager, and XF burn. Okay, decent selection. Education, well, we've got LibreOffice Math. Games, so for the gamers amongst you, we have Steam installed by default. Graphics, G-Color 2 and the GIMP. Excellent. Some distributions aren't installing the GIMP by default these days, which I think is wrong because it's one of the flagships of Linux as far as I'm concerned at the moment. On internet, a Vahi SSH browser and VNC browser. Chromium, which I've just installed. Firefox, HexChat, Pidgin. Do people still use Pidgin? I haven't used it for years, but nevertheless. And you've got Thunderbird as well, which is great. What about multimedia? You have Audacious, Pulse Audio, the video for Linux test utility. Okay, and the video capture utility. That's quite nice. XF burn and VLC we've already seen from the word go. I chose to install LibreOffice, and it's also installed QPDF view. What's in other? HP scanning utility, and then we have, of course, all of our settings and a system option where we can access the Manjaro hello screen should we want to. So far so good. Let's go to the settings manager and see what's there. I'll full screen this. So, is this XFCE or is this Manjaro settings? I'm not entirely sure, but we seem to have all the standard stuff. Appearance. So, what style do we want? Icons. So it's Papyrus Maya that it's installed by default. What fonts do we want? What settings? Okay. Nice and straightforward. Let's just click that off. Is this the settings utility? I'm just trying to The Manjaro Settings utility. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, desktop, wallpaper for my desktop. Let's see what they've got. Quite a nice selection by the look of it. In fact, maybe I'll just click through some of these. Oh, that's very purple. What about that? Windows-like, but quite nice. A plainish Manjaro desktop. Nice black and white photograph. Little dog, cartoon dog. And what are these? Crabs and a turtle. Or a terrapin, should I say. Quite nice. Seem to be very custom-based wallpapers. I quite like that. That's very colourful. Okay, so bottom line is we have lots of different wallpapers to choose from. I'm just going to settle with that one for the time being. Window manager tweaks. Okay, so the standard stuff there, really. Set workspaces, etc. Your display manager, which we've already looked at. Your power manager. Okay. Session and startup, software updates, a MIME type editor, and of course, Light DM settings manager. So let's launch the software updates. And I think this is actually per Mac. In fact, I believe the Manjaro developers were the people who created per Mac. There shouldn't actually be any updates here because, well, I updated it in just before showing you it to make sure that VirtualBox was working properly. It's taken a little while to go through everything, though. But let me just see if I can, while we're doing this, go into About. Yes, it's per Mac. So now I've sort of followed a method where I've always installed per Mac on my Arch systems because I found it a really useful utility for searching for packages. But I haven't actually used it for updating because I found sometimes it just doesn't work. But as Manjaro developers have actually done this, created the tool, I'm assuming that it works pretty well on this. I'm just going to go into preferences and see what it's got there. So official repositories use mirrors from, etc., etc. AUR, so it's got AUR support updated already. Snap support is updated. Okay, so presumably if I search for Snapd, Snapd is indeed already installed. What about Flatpaks? Flatpak is already installed as well. So it looks like you can pretty much use whatever you like here, Flatpaks or snaps. I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing that the little application utility is snaps. It just gives you a little bit more choice. What have we got over here? Restore the minimize all open windows and show the desktop. Okay, so let's just create a couple of windows. And if I hit that, yeah, it just literally minimizes them. So that's fine. What have we got here? We've got our workspaces. 2 seem to be set up by default. And here we have kernel options. So let's have a look at the kernels that we've got installed. So it's running kernel 5.418-1, running and installed. We have a few other options there, a real-time kernel, and not an LTS kernel by the look of... Oh, no, I'm wrong. There's an LTX kernel. So if I wanted to install the LTS kernel, I'm just going to follow along. I quite like the fact that there's a separate kernel utility, to be honest, because the naming of kernels isn't always completely obvious if you're not used to that sort of thing. Anyway, we'll let it get on with what it's doing. What do we got on the right-click menu? Just the standard stuff. Terminal, so if I hit terminal after clicking on home, great, it opens up a terminal in home OTB. That's quite nice. Let's have a look generally at some of the other things it's set up. So if I go cat etc fstab, you will see here that it has indeed mounted the FAT32 ESP partition on boot EFI, which was the option I selected, and it's created an ext4 partition. There is no swap file in this fstab, so I presume it's running without that, which is fine for the time being. Okay, changes were made successfully, so hit close. But yeah, I like the icon set. It's a nice XFCE desktop. I presume I can use just standard pacman commands. So sudo pacman syu, and off it goes, and it syncs the pacman repos. There's nothing to do. I wonder if it's got an AUR helper installed. Let's go to pmac again and see if it's installed already. Yay. No, it's not installed. Yay. It obviously manages everything through pmac. I personally would install Yay myself, but I like to manage the AUR from a command line. Guys, I don't quite know what else to say about this. It's a nice XFCE system. It's Arch, of course, which gives you the option to run whatever you want. You can add other desktops to it, clearly. Manjaro Settings Manager, is that what we've already seen? No, it isn't. I missed this one completely. So where is that should you need it? Manjaro Settings Manager. Let me just search for it. So if you just search for Manjaro Settings Manager, this is separate to the standard XFCE settings. And if I click on kernel there, I just want to see what happens. Okay, so it brings up that. So language packs. Okay, so this is because I selected GB right from the word go. It's selected all the UK English packages by the looks of it. Let's move down a little bit. Yeah, it has automatically, although the US language packs are already there. So that's available language packs, and it's installed GB and US. Okay, good. What else have we got here? Locale settings. Okay, I'm going to remove United States. Sorry, guys. Just so I have UK as default. Let's go back. User account. OTB. Okay, great. And I can add another user here, presumably. Yes, I can. I do like that. I like that a lot. And time and date. Okay, I can set up time and date automatically. Hardware clock is in local time zone, which is what we want. And it's certainly coming up with the right time. Okay, I'm going to quit this now. Nice desktop. It's Arch, but not Arch. It's maintained by the Manjaro developers, and because they hold packages back, the idea is that it's not quite as worrisome as Arch could be, because using the stable repo makes sure that the packages should work. Okay, let's go and have a chat about this. Okay, so that's Manajaro XFCE edition. By the way, I just before I shut down, I did try the print utility, and it picked up my Canon MG 5600 straight away, and I was able to print a test page. So kudos for that. So what do I think about it? Well, I like Arch. The world of Linux seems sometimes to be divided into Arch-based distributions and Debian distributions, and I do like both, I have to say. I thought Manjaro's implementation in terms of their theming was great. I liked the welcome screen. I liked many of the default applications that it comes pre-installed with, and some of the additional tools and configuration utilities. What I didn't like was when I first booted it in VirtualBox, how long it took to actually boot. I'm going to blame VirtualBox for that rather than Manjaro, because I'm sure it's something to do with that and a mixture of Manjaro's hardware detection utility. It did boot, but if you try it yourself, please be patient. What I really wasn't impressed with is the fact that it completely failed to do the default install. It bombed out, and we ended up with a FAT32 partition created, but with no mount point and no ext4 partition for root. Whether that was just one of those things that occasionally happens or not, I don't know, but going into manual configuration, it all seemed to work fine. Although every time I rebooted the system, it did come up with trying to boot from CD DVD before it reset itself and booted correctly. All of this could, of course, be VirtualBox issues, so I would be prepared to put it down to that. But if you give it a go in VirtualBox, just be patient, guys. It takes a long time to boot. Other than that, though, the installation was pretty flawless. I love the fact that it provides documentation, written documentation, a manual. I think that's great. The idea of holding packages back just to make sure that they're working properly, I also think is pretty useful. I can't say I've had major problems with a standard Arch distribution, but you know, it just gives it that little bit extra. So if you want to give it a go, guys, it's incredibly popular. Why not give it a spin? It's a nice desktop. It's easy to get up and running. Has it got much over Arch itself? For me personally, I think I'd still go for a standard Arch. And in terms of look and feel, I'm probably leaning a bit more towards the Arco Linux if I was looking at a variant of Arch, but it's certainly a great desktop, and the extra stability probably makes it more useful for some users. See what you think. Give it a crack. That's what I love about Linux. There's just so much choice. So Manjaro, as I say, it's Arch Jim, but not as we know it. It's its own custom-based distro based on Arch. So, have a great weekend, everyone, and I'll see you next week.